Hey everyone, welcome back to Genai World News. We're kicking things off today with a major diplomatic development in the Middle East. The Financial Times is reporting that the United States says it has reached an agreement with Iran to put a stop to a dangerous cycle of tit-for-tat military strikes and get negotiations back on track. This is a significant claim, but here's the catch. Tehran has not yet publicly confirmed that the deal is done. The back-and-forth attacks have been putting serious strain on the fragile ceasefire situation around the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical shipping lanes on the planet. Roughly a fifth of the world's oil flows through that narrow waterway, so any escalation there sends shockwaves through global energy markets. The U.S. announcement signals that Washington is pushing hard to stabilize the situation and get diplomatic channels reopened. But until Iran officially confirms its end of the bargain, the world is essentially holding its breath. Diplomats and energy traders alike will be watching very closely for Tehran's response in the hours and days ahead. This one is still developing, so stay tuned. Alright, now let's talk about a number that is genuinely hard to wrap your head around. $590 billion. According to the Financial Times, South Korean tech giants Samsung and SK Hynix, two of the world's most dominant memory chip manufacturers, have announced a massive joint investment plan alongside the South Korean government to dramatically scale up their chipmaking capacity. We're talking about building new factories to meet what they describe as surging, almost insatiable demand for memory chips, demand that is being driven, in large part, by the global AI boom. Every AI model you've ever heard of, every data center, every cloud computing operation running large-scale AI, requires enormous amounts of high-bandwidth memory. And right now, the world simply cannot make enough of it fast enough. The South Korean government's involvement here is notable. This isn't just a corporate bet, it's a national strategic play. South Korea is doubling down on semiconductors as the cornerstone of its economic future, and this $590 billion commitment is one of the largest industrial investment announcements in history. For context, this dwarfs the entire GDP of many mid-sized economies. The chip race is on, and South Korea just made clear it intends to stay at the front of the pack. Moving now to a deeply troubling story out of South Asia. BBC News is reporting that Pakistani airstrikes inside Afghan territory have killed dozens of people, according to the Taliban government in Kabul. The Taliban is saying that civilians were among those killed, which, if confirmed, would mark a significant escalation in cross-border tensions. Pakistan, for its part, is pushing back on that characterization, insisting that the strikes were targeted military operations aimed at militant groups, specifically groups that Islamabad accuses of carrying out attacks inside Pakistan. This is a conflict that has been quietly simmering for some time. Pakistan has long blamed Afghan-based militant factions for deadly attacks on its own soil and has been under growing domestic pressure to act. But airstrikes that kill Afghan civilians, if that's what happened, are likely to inflame an already tense relationship between Islamabad and the Taliban administration. The Taliban, which itself came to power through military force, is now framing this as an attack on Afghan sovereignty. The international community will be watching closely to see whether this escalates further or whether diplomatic channels can cool things down quickly. In trade and geopolitics news, the Financial Times reports that China is tightening the screws on Japanese businesses by expanding its export control restrictions to cover more companies. The new measures focus on so-called dual-use items, that's technology and materials that have both civilian and military applications. This is China using one of its most powerful economic tools, control over critical materials and technology exports. Beijing has done this before, most notably with rare earth restrictions targeting multiple countries, and it's becoming an increasingly common weapon in geopolitical disputes. The targeting of Japanese firms specifically is significant. Japan and China have a complex and often fraught relationship, and this latest move suggests Beijing is applying deliberate pressure, likely connected to Japan's growing defense spending, its closer alignment with the U.S. on semiconductor export controls, and its support for Taiwan-related security frameworks. For Japanese companies caught in the crossfire, this creates real supply chain headaches. And it sends a broader message to the international business community. Operating in sectors that touch on technology or defense makes you a potential target in the increasingly weaponized world of trade policy. Here's a story that could have serious consequences for millions of people across the continent this winter. The Financial Times is warning that Europe is on track to enter the colder months with natural gas storage levels at their lowest point in 15 years. Storage facilities across the European Union are not being refilled quickly enough. The pace of replenishment is falling well behind historical norms, and analysts are raising alarms about what that could mean when temperatures drop and heating demand spikes. The root causes are layered. The ongoing fallout from reduced Russian gas supplies, a consequence of the war in Ukraine, continues to constrain Europe's options. And while the continent has made impressive strides in diversifying its energy sources, those alternatives haven't fully plugged the gap, especially when global demand for liquefied natural gas is fierce. If storage levels stay this low heading into winter, Europe could face higher energy prices, potential supply shortfalls, and renewed political pressure on governments that have been promising energy security to their citizens. This is one of those slow-moving crises that can very quickly become a fast-moving emergency if the weather doesn't cooperate. Global trade is getting more expensive, fast. The Financial Times reports that international freight shipping rates have surged to their highest levels since the Red Sea crisis of 2024, and the driving force this time is the looming threat of new tariffs from the Trump administration. Companies around the world are racing to front-load shipments, essentially cramming as much cargo onto ships as possible right now, before fresh levies from Washington take effect. That scramble is creating a surge in demand for container shipping capacity, and when demand spikes like this, prices follow. This pattern will look familiar. We saw something similar in the early stages of the first Trump trade war, and again during the pandemic-era supply chain chaos. Companies learned from those experiences that waiting until tariffs hit means paying more for goods on top of the tariff itself. So now they're moving early. The irony is that this kind of front-loading actually creates short-term inflation. Goods get more expensive to move, and those costs get passed along. It also means there could be a sharp slowdown in shipping activity once the tariff deadline passes and inventories are already stocked up. For global supply chains, it's yet another wave of volatility to navigate. And now, a story that puts a very human face on one of the world's most devastating humanitarian situations. The Financial Times is reporting on how residents of Gaza are turning to clay, mud, and rubble to build makeshift homes. Because Israel's ban on importing concrete and steel into the territory means conventional construction materials simply aren't available. People are constructing mud huts, structures that echo building techniques from centuries ago, just to escape the misery of living in thin, flimsy tents that offer almost no protection from the elements. In the heat of summer and through cold nights, these basic shelters represent an enormous effort and ingenuity under almost unimaginable circumstances. The scale of destruction in Gaza means that even if materials were available tomorrow, rebuilding would take years. Without them, families are doing whatever they can with whatever is at hand: broken concrete, sand, straw, and clay. This story is a stark reminder that beyond the political and military dimensions of the conflict, there is a daily human reality of millions of people simply trying to survive. It's a situation that aid organizations and international observers continue to call one of the worst humanitarian crises of this generation. All right, that's a wrap on today's top stories. It has been a heavy but important news day across the globe. And that's your global briefing for today, June 29th, 2026. From a potential U.S.-Iran diplomatic breakthrough to South Korea's massive chip investment, escalating tensions in South Asia, and the very real human toll of conflict in Gaza, there is a lot happening out there, and we're going to keep bringing it to you every single day. If you found today's coverage valuable, please hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people find this channel. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss an update. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Genai World News. Stay informed, stay sharp, take care, everyone.